So in making this video, spotlighting this lens, I've actually changed the way I approach my look at photography. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Right, why you need a 14 to 30 f4s lens?
I've got one, thanks.
Oh, okay, that's it. Well, we both have one.
Yeah.
The thing is, we don't use it very often.
We don't.
And the thing is, we wanted to spotlight it because the times we have used it, we've actually been quite surprised by its ability.
It is good. For someone who hates f4 lenses,
yeah, to be
Mr.
fair,
Whitehead.
I'm on record saying I hate f4 lenses because they're so annoying with the low light. But with the new bodies, maybe this can change my mind. I mean, what was your experience with it so far?
Again, when I've used it, I've been very happy with it. I don't use it very often because I don't do landscape photography, etc. And often 24mm on the 24 to 70 is wide enough for me. When I do use it though, it's very good.
I mean, my experience is when something's in the foreground on the edges, they're always going to be warped. Because at 14, I mean 14 you kind of have to give way a bit to it.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm going to find out. How giving do you have to be? Can you use it in low light all the time? What the distance is at best? How much distortion do we have on this? It's quite expensive still. I bought, like most of the things, I buy them open box.
Yeah.
I think it's about £800. But when I need it, I need it.
Yeah.
And that's proved much
and
worth
compared to the Holy Trinity 14 to 24 f2.8, which is probably 2.5 times the price. But from what we've seen, that stacks up really, really well against, you know, the 14 to 24, which is a lot more expensive.
So
you haven't got much room. You need to get wider than 24.
That's the thing, yeah.
It gets you out of jail, doesn't it?
It does. That's the get out of jail card. And because you don't always really, you think 24 is wide, then you try 14, and you realise you might actually be able to make an epic photo, like a David Lean, you know, is it Peter O'Toole coming out the desert slowly from a panoramic view? You remember the first shot of
no, you see, now you know my knowledge of films is zero.
You haven't seen Lawrence of Arabia?
I might have done. I can never remember what films I've seen and anything about them.
But yeah, so basically, ultra wide have this epic appeal and look, don't they? And maybe this can do this. Brill. Right, let's go and find out.
Okay.
Loz and I walked around Coventry on a very wintry day. We both used the 14 to 30 on our Z6 and Z7 just to get a different perspective of what we normally do, because we haven't done that before. That's quite nice. And you can crop in and it's really sharp still. So this is a crop at 30mm and I've image corrected it. As you can see, the sharpness is just superb. I couldn't really expect much more from this. So this is to show the difference between shooting at 14 and 24, which Loz and I, and well, most people are used to shooting at, really. Which I suppose it can be. Though when you start shooting wider than that, you kind of enter this new arena of what you can do. So this is at 14. So if you shoot at 24, this is the 24mm now. So you can see what you're really missing out on there between the two. And possibly you could stand further back to get the same perspective, or you could try and stitch images together, but again, that's not always possible. We're walking on the bridge at this point, as you can see. So there's nowhere else I could get to step back to get a wider perspective. So this is Coventry Cathedral at 14, and you can get such a good perspective here. I mean, some of the distortion is kind of nice. Does it add to this like kind of epic look of a wide angle lens? I mean, it's not too distorted, but it kind of creates an atmosphere, a look, doesn't it? So this is at 24mm now. You can see the difference between the two perspectives from 14 to 24. I would never be able to get that picture with a 24. And again, the sharpness is really crisp. Couldn't expect more, really. So this is an example when around the edges of the frame at 14, the distortion can get really bad, especially if something's quite close to you and towards the edges, like this man here. Obviously, it's extremely distorted. I don't think I'd be able to fix that. So I'm just really impressed with the scale and the clarity and the look of shooting at 14mm without it being a fisheye. It's just so good. I mean, look at the clarity, 100%. It's just incredible. Again, there are just some distortions. And when you go lower down, this is Loz there. Again, the perspective you can create, this warping. I mean, I use distortion to advantage here to create this like vortex kind of overwhelming look. I was interested to see in low light if this f4 lens would suffer. So this is a handheld at 1/10 of a second f4, and it's 1600 ISO, so that's quite a reasonable amount for the Z6 to deal with at 24mm. So I wanted to compare it to the 2.8. So it's a really crisp image. At 1/10 of a second, it's great. No complaints there at all. So comparing with the 2.8 version, you can go down to ISO 500 at 1/10, and you'd expect a much clearer image, although when you crop it into 100%, there isn't much difference. So the 14 to 30 is on at 1600, and there isn't that much difference. The power of the Z6 is so good that you can shoot at 1600 and there's hardly any distortion. So shooting at 100th of a second, at 200%, you could start to see some of the differences. So in the shadows, the deepest shadows on the 14 to 30, you can see it's pixelated, and in the 2.8 version, shot at 2.8, there isn't hardly any. And it does look a crisper image on the actual focus area. But again, it's not too bad. So you start to see the differences when you can shoot at 200th of a second. So the 14 to 30 has to shoot at 32,000, whereas the 2.8 version can halve it at 16,000. And without cropping in, they look very similar. When you crop in, the shadows, the deeper shadows are completely pixelated. Even the focus area is pixelated too. Whereas the 2.8 version is half the ISO, so it's half the damage in a way, and it's a nice clean image. It's interesting to note that using a 2.8 lens, you can either double your shutter speed or halve your ISO depending on what you do. This is from a recent wedding I'd taken at a venue in Coventry, and it is quite a dark venue. But I used my 14 because a 24 does not show the building at its best. At 100%, sure, okay, it's not the sharpest, it is a bit pixelated, but 5600 ISO, that's a perfectly usable image. So then I used my 24 to 70 at 2.8, and I halved the ISO, so it is a much cleaner image, and you can crop in, and there's hardly any distortion there. As you can see from this image, the sides are really warped, and it's pretty much unrecoverable. Because the registrar here was too close to the camera, this is really stretched, and the side here with this gentleman and the child, so what I did, I cropped into a different aspect ratio, so the registrar looks fine, and I've cut off that side for the image corrections to be able to work. Astrophotography is also possible with this lens if you have a long exposure. So this is 30 seconds at f4, ISO 100, and it's a sharp image. Okay, so here's two real-world examples. Which one is which? I've used the 14 to 30 and my 24 to 70 f2.8, both at 24mm. And without cropping in too far, they're almost exactly the same. However, when you crop in, you can tell which one's which now. Which one's the 2.8 and the f4. Same settings. As you can see, the 14 to 30 is on the right here, just to make it change. And you can see the shadows, once you crop in, they're pixelated. And on the 2.8 version, because it's a 2.8, they're not. They're quite smooth. And there is a bit of distortion there, and there's some shading, but generally the main focus areas are really clean and nice. And I guess that's the difference between using an f4 and an f2.8 in a low light situation. So I guess if those conditions were darker, the f4 would struggle even more and may become unusable. So how much could the software recover? So we could bring the shadows back, that goes a lot of the noise. Then you could even lower the sharpening. Okay, so that's reduced the clarity, but also in the sharpness, but also which we got rid of the noise. Of course, without cropping in, it's fine anyway.
So in making this video, spotlighting this lens, I've actually changed the way I approach my look at photography.
I thought you only really wanted that really wide angle when you hadn't got room to move back away from your subject. But are you now saying you want to use it in other venues where you've got plenty of room because it's got a different look about it?
Making this video has been quite, it's changed my mind about how I'm going to approach it. I thought it was just
get you out of jail when you hadn't got any room. I thought it was good, I thought it was sharp. As I said in the intro, we should really probably consider using it a bit more often. What I did find really surprising was when you did the same shot like at 24 and one at 14 to show the difference, how big the difference is between 14 to 24. But then 24 as a number is more than 50% bigger than 14. So I suppose why am I surprised that there is a big difference? But there is. But it just brings a different sort of something to the composition.
That's the thing. When we're walking around, I found it really enjoying it, because I think we're both finding new ways to shoot the same things we've all seen from all our lives. So you can turn off in camera corrections.
I didn't know that.
And then it makes it even more like a tunnel effect in fisheye.
Right,
but some
okay.
people like that more because it kind of leads you into the photo.
Yeah.
So we fully recommend this lens for daytime use, especially for landscape, for walking around, for street photography. It is a lot better.
Yeah.
So it does get our Russ and Lars stamp of approval.
So why do you want a 14 to 24?
Indoors, when I'm doing, as I was shown in the video, when I'm doing indoor photography with it, it's borderline if it's acceptable for professional use.
In what way? Because it's got
lower light.
Too much noise.
Too much noise. Especially if you're going to blow it up or crop in. If you don't crop in, you're fine.
But it's just a really nice lens.
I mean, I am tempted by the 21.8 because then obviously you've got to have no problems with light at all. But then you don't. That's nowhere near 14. So you don't have that kind of David Lean look. To get the 14 to 24, I'd exchange that one for about £700, and I'd have to spend about £1,600 extra.
Well, it's bigger and heavier. It's the same size as the 24 to 70, isn't it? 14 to 24.
It's less likely to take it out. I wouldn't do street photography with it because it's too big.
Yeah.
So you're losing the practicality. But that's the other thing. Is this the same dilemma between the 24 to 70 f4 and the 24 to 70 2.8? Is this the same argument we're having because of the f4s and the 2.8s? 24
to 70 is your bread and butter range. So you're going to really want the best quality lens for that, because it's going to be a very commonly used lens, isn't it? I mean, we do a lot of music photography, so now you brought that up. Actually, yeah, it's a good point. For music, if I was wanting a really wide angle lens at a music gig, I would at 14 to 24, I'd definitely take it and use it. 14 to 30 would be marginal.
Although saying that, when we were doing that gig a few months ago, we did get out the 14 to 30 at the end, and we did that wide shot. We did that would work out, and it looks reasonable.
It did look good.
And it did, as long as you don't crop in. But that's my same argument with doing churches.
Yeah. To be honest though, we keep saying the Z6 II particularly is so good in low light. With music photographs, you close down the shadows. You don't open them up.
Well, there's the argument for you, really.
Yeah. But when Father Christmas does bring you your 14 to 20, which you know is going to happen.
Let's see what Santa brings.
Let's just see what Santa brings. Merry Christmas, one and all.